For anybody listening, this is Karallyn, founder of the Gaia Sophia School of Healing. And today it's just going to be an opportunity for us to pick your brain, hear some about what it is that you're into, what some of your journey has been like as an entrepreneur. This is, for all intents and purposes, the kickoff interview for the New Earth entrepreneurs, connecting nodes, seeing what other entrepreneurs and especially holistic entrepreneurs, consciouspreneurs, people who are trying to, I love in one of the conversations we had before, some of what your mission and similar with mine too, with this kind of like the great, you use the terminology, the great turning, for being part of the great turning. So yeah, I would love to just start delving in, talking and hearing from you about what it is that you're into with the Sophia School of Healing.
Yeah, so I've actually been doing healing work since 2001, which is quite a while. And this is just my most recent iteration. It's gone through many phases over the years. And this core mission of, as you say, really assisting in the great turning has always been something I've been aware of since I started. And so at this point, specializing in working with women and women who are aligned with this kind of work, who want to evolve personally, heal their own lives, and evolve and awaken spiritually, and then help to serve humanity in whatever way they feel called to do that. So that might be creatively, it might be through healing work or some other way. And much of it is based around the idea of creating community, because I feel like that's part of where we need to go with these changes is community versus where we've been in this paradigm of hyper-individualism.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about last time briefly, and I think it is such a paradox, and I'd love to hear about how it is that you're building community, because we do have this almost like illusion of hyper-connected. We have the social media, we have these little windows that we get to see into each other's worlds, but I know for myself, community is so important. So to hear that you as well are finding a community to be very important. I'm curious how it is that you're finding. Are you doing a lot of online community? Are you doing in-person work more?
A little bit of both. It's interesting because I just made a video about this idea of we're so connected, but we're not. It's an illusion of connection, or it's rather a really shallow, superficial connection versus real, authentic, meaningful connection. But yeah, I have a women's circle that I've been holding here in Asheville for almost 2 years, and that's been going really well. It's been really transformative for myself and for the other women who are part of it. And I am also working online. Most of my work is online. I just have little threads like the women's circle and some other work like that I'm doing here in Asheville. But my focus is really to grow as much as possible online. And so I am still in the early stages of building an online community through a membership community space. And so I'm building all kinds of things out that way, but everything has this core of community.
I love that. And just so anybody listening knows, I am going to link both your YouTube channels and other social media, as well as a link to your website and your membership, the opportunity for people to check that out.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is incredibly important. And I know even over the superficial digital connections, there is still opportunity to have connection and really build community and support for one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to clarify, I think when I tune into the superficial connections and things like social media in general, right? Where, we're connected to millions of people a day? It's kind of crazy, but literally we are. And yet there's very little through that actual connection, right? But if we take something and consciously are building something online that is a deeper connection, then I think that is available in the online world. So it can be beneficial if we use it, I'll say, properly, versus this sort of, to me, it's a matter of depth, right? superficial level or deeper level. So I'm always seeking the deeper levels. So I think that's entirely possible with all the technology that we have. So that part of it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, and I imagine other people might be too, two parts about how long have you been pursuing to create offers of your own, whether it was through healing work specifically or now this kind of newer building of community. Just want to get like a frame of reference, because I also, on a second part of the question, want to hear about some of the challenges you've encountered as you've developed putting yourself out in the both personal, like in the physical spaces, but especially in the online spaces, creating online community, what the journey has been like for you.
Yeah, as I said, I started doing healing work in 2001, and I started off doing body work and then went into Reiki and then added all these other things. And it's changed quite a lot, as you can imagine, since 2001. It is a radically different world in so many ways. So initially in my business, it was, and especially because I was doing body work, right? I was only seeing people in person. We didn't have social media for a few years yet. And so it was the kind of situation where I literally just hung a shingle and people just came. And then somewhere along the way, I'm going to say around 2008-9, when social media really came in, it really started changing everything, of course, the whole landscape, but definitely doing healing work. At that point, my work had evolved into sort of spiritual counseling, this modality called depth hypnosis. And I was working a little bit online, but mostly in person. And it was at that point, it felt to me at that point that it became more complicated in a lot of ways, like in terms of the marketing piece, putting myself out there. The market became a lot more, maybe it wasn't more flooded, but it felt more flooded because social media, and I'm saying social media just as a, right, just the internet and how much everything grew. And so it complicated things a lot. And so for me, starting out so long ago and having it be one way and then having it be, oh, those things don't work at all anymore. Like you really have to put in this whole other level of work and effort to put yourself out there. And I've almost felt, honestly, and I still feel this way, you almost need a marketing degree to to be able to put yourself out as a healer or a coach or whatever. And the thing is you can do all these trainings as I have, but they don't teach you how to market yourself. It's just, here's all your skills. And there's this idea or hope that, okay, I have all these skills and then that's going to be enough to just put myself out there. And in fact, there's this whole conversation that I feel like I've been plugged into in some way or another around 2008 or 9, where it's, you have to have a niche. You have to be specific about who you're talking to and who you're marketing to. And it just became a whole different thing. And so it's been very challenging. The last decade more so has been, because again, the landscape continues to change. Even if we're looking at something like the algorithm with social media and trying to get, it's really complicated and it's constantly changing. So I have found, and I think this is part of why I really have this drive to create community, is that as a healer and just as a human, but as a healer out there trying to do my work in the world and do my own personal healing, spiritual growth work by myself, it is not the way to go, in my opinion. It is really hard. It is really isolating. And that makes hard work all that much harder. And so I feel like I've learned a lot of things in my life the hard way. And so part of my work is to impart what I've learned to other people and say, okay, this is what I've learned the hard way. Learn from me, hopefully, or someone, what not to do and what might work better so that you don't have to struggle in these ways.
There's a couple major points there with both the um, connecting. Oh, let me not lose train of thought because it is multiple points, but I completely agree Yeah, but the challenges of you really had both the timeline of working in person 2001 to present, um, and then I'm curious, maybe we delve a little more into some of that, but also yeah, that process of not having to go it alone. The marketing degree too is something that's, I feel like, in my pursuits of figuring out about like how to both spread what it is that we're doing, because it's like there's so much noise just every day connected, like you said, almost a million people it can seem. And yeah, it's quite an interesting. I've had that experience of some of the social stigma of marketing, of learning, because some people aren't necessarily trying to share conscious healing work. Their intentions might be something of more like trying to take and but trying to still utilize and learn from those skill sets of how we share what it is that we're doing. How do we get through the noise of just, I know on my Facebook social media feed, for example, I'll maybe hear from people in my local community one out of 100 things that they share, because there's just so much going on.
Yeah.
Again, that kind of illusion of connection, like the friends that I have on there, um, how much connection really can take place just with everything else going on. So I know for myself, it's been really important to learn with what I'm wanting to do, which is help other entrepreneurs. How do we share what it is what we're doing and really connect with people? So I'd also love to hear, along with some of those challenges of figuring out how to get onto the online world, maybe what some of the successes are that you've figured out through that pursuit of getting online, forming community, what it is that really feels has been working well with you to make connections in this virtual digital space.
I'm going to tell you, I'm still figuring it out, because up until just recently, I was still, I don't know, I moved here to Asheville 6.5 years ago. So I still had from California, and I still had clients from California that I was working with, and still have some. And so I've always had that sort of partial online thing for many years, and had a location here in Asheville here until recently, and decided to go more full in on the online, at least the majority. And so I'm trying to figure it out. Now, one thing I will say that I think, and I'm still, again, investigating this, but I have hired out for some of the marketing help, because, and I'm just in the first stages with an agency with this. But I will tell you this, that just the first month in, I'm learning how much I don't know. In fact, I put a post on Facebook like maybe a week ago and said, wow, I had no idea how haphazardly I'd been running my business all these years, because I don't have all the marketing know-how. And so I'm learning through my virtual assistant what I need to be doing, or what I maybe should have been doing all along, but I didn't know to do. I'm learning a lot that way, but the main thing is you can't do everything yourself. I have had a tendency to be sort of independent, and I think like a lot of us in this culture can be, and then we end up burning ourselves out. Some of those I don't know much of what I'm doing at all. And the marketing piece for me is one of those. I'm not a fan of the marketing piece at all. And I think a lot of healers and coaches also feel the same way. It's just, there's something about it to me that is but we have to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling already a relief from feeling supported that way, and being able to say, hey, I don't know how to do these things, and you do these for me. And then I can just do what I do really well. So that's something I would absolutely recommend, at least outsourcing some of the pieces if possible.
Okay, absolutely. And if you're open to sharing, I've definitely felt for myself, I'm learning between both automations and other people to be able to utilize to assist in the processes for running the business, for marketing and putting the messaging out there. If it's a specific resource, I'm sure that's something that could be really beneficial for people to know. Virtual assistants or some of the extra support they might be able to receive.
Absolutely. And in fact, the woman whose company that I chose, I had done a training with her in 2021. So I'd already worked with her and already knew and trusted her. And it's interesting because so what was it called? It was Earth Rooted Leadership, this course that I took with her in 2021. And the name of her company is Earth Rooted Assistance. And so she's definitely aligned with everything that we're talking about. And I was excited to be able to work with someone, not her specifically. She put this company together. So to support her vision and her work, so far so good, like I said.
Earth-rooted assistance. I love that, especially the whole new Earth. It's such a walk of the world to say that we have these great endeavors you were talking about with the marketing aspect. I see that as the outward facing, and I feel like a lot of the healers or the experts and the educators are very internally doing their own work, or very closely connected with the people that they're working with. It's like a very intimate, a lot of times I find, kind of style of work, especially you being a body worker, an energy worker, it's like a lot of times it's either one-on-one or just in that kind of like intimate container. So I can just imagine for myself as well as what I imagine for you, the difficulty of out into the void of just like the digital spaces that have that kind of support, especially with people who are aligned and saying that there are certain values, if it's earth-centric, if it's just trying to be people who are caring and wanting good things to happen for others and for the planet as a whole. I'm really grateful to know that, and I hope to be able to continue to offer support myself like that, putting together the people and the tools that will help other experts, educators, people who want to be taking part in the turning in this way, because it is such a, we can each be doing our own individual pieces of our collective healing or whatever work we're doing that's not necessarily broadcast out, but I think there are individuals who want to impact at a different scale and utilize digital technology and these digital spaces to say, hey, there are these tools and resources that would be a great benefit. It's like the mycelial web underneath the trees. It's like, how do we spread the nutrients or the messages that we're receiving so that others can benefit from that? So yeah, I'd love to hear about tools.
I just want to respond to something you said, because I think I'm not alone, like you said, in the sort of the work I do, and it still is like pretty intimate work. At this point, I'm really working primarily somatically, at least in my one-on-one work with people. And it's really intimate. And I'm more of an introverted kind of person and quiet and stuff like that. And I always have been. And so to feel like I have to rally, I don't know what, from inside of myself to, like you said, broadcast to the world like a true extrovert, I suppose, would be really comfortable doing. And I can be in both places, introvert, extrovert, but it is a real push to be like, okay, knowing that, like you said, the trolls and all of this, especially with the culture the way it is now, there is so much divisiveness, there's so much hate and judgment and fear bouncing around out there that it makes it even scarier to put yourself out in the world like that, because I know that's coming. It will, if you're visible. I think it's just going to happen at some point that you're going to say something that's going to hit somebody the wrong way. So it brings up a lot of stuff.
I'm trying to think about, from your set of experiences, for the people who might be listening, if you have any maybe words of advice for anybody who's either starting out or they're along their path, maybe just needing some support, maybe they're feeling too much of that push-pull dynamic of being an introvert trying to extrovert's world, or just from your own experience, from your journey, is there anything that stands out as if you had known that a few years earlier, or just anything that stands out as gold nuggets of advice?
Let's see, if I had known something earlier, but I think I did know this earlier and have been doing the work, but I think that this requires, at least from my perspective, that it really requires doing our own inner work. It really does, because my experience as a healer all along the way has been that our clients and people out there that aren't our clients, whoever, people in general, will trigger our deeper unhealed issues. And it will come up with clients, and it will come up in all kinds of ways, and it definitely will come up if we're trying to put ourselves out there in the world. And so that's, I think, why I'm such a big proponent of doing the work, because the more clear I am, the more grounded I am in myself, the more I can help you, and the more I can put myself out there without so much fear that I just keep pulling back or just feel like I can't do it at all. For me personally, coming from where I've come from in life, it's required a lot. And I think for me, what I would also say is that having a compelling enough reason why you're doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And keeping your eye on that. If I didn't have a compelling enough reason why, I would have quit a long time ago. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that if there is something bigger that you want, you have to stay focused on that, because there are pitfalls along the way. And I think that's just life in general, right? There are pitfalls along the way, challenges and obstacles and things that would pull us off our path in a sense. And so in order to stay focused, but it's challenging. And try to also, I think I've made this clear, but have support if you can, because I went for too much of that time with very little support. And just generally in my relationships and things like that, lack of family, lack of solid relationships, definitely a lack of people on the same path. And that's still the thing. That last part is still a thing. And again, with the isolation piece, then it can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm on this path all by myself. And it can feel like I don't have, at least I have felt this many times. Okay, I don't know if I have the power just by myself, in myself, to continue. It's akin to hiking up some big mountain, and I'm not as healthy as I thought, or as young as I was, or I don't have as much vitality to get up this mountain by myself. I need a Sherpa or something. And without that, it is much harder and easier to just stop, I think, or burn out.
Yes, not necessarily just a quick sprint up the mountain either, is it?
It might be for some people, I don't know, but not for me. No, absolutely not. But I hate to say this, but I think it might be true at this point in life. I think that what they say might be true in terms of anything worth having is worth working for. We have to work for things. We're trying to build something. It's not just a light switch. Again, unless they're the right people and you have the right connections, but for, I think, most of us, we have to work probably longer and harder than we might have realized initially. Now, if I had known that years ago, I had these ideas in my head when I was younger about, I had a lot of magical thinking, a lot of ideas, and it was very disheartening for me when I realized, oh wait, that's not how life works. Yeah. And so navigating that and being realistic is really important.
Yeah, realism. I feel like that is even a saying that elaborates that of, there's vision without action is a daydream.
Yes.
And action without vision is a nightmare. So it does feel like a blend of that realism and the idealism, or that kind of just like visionary, almost head in the clouds, like, oh, grand idea, but yeah, boots on the ground, and now the actual steps that it takes to become reality.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I will say that I was so idealistic. Extremely idealistic and very head in the clouds, very like more wishful thinking. And it took some hard experience for me to get oh no, we have to balance both, right? I think it's good to hold some of, maybe not idealism, but hope is maybe a little more grounded. And that realism is so important. That's what keeps our feet on the ground.
Yeah.
And without it, we're just floating around. I don't know that it's possible to actually manifest anything in concrete reality with just your head in the clouds and not being grounded in reality to some degree. It's that part about taking the steps, like you said.
It's great to hold those intentions, and I'm no law of attraction expert, so maybe there is something to just holding that intention so potently that it becomes reality. I think it's a blend. You don't just meditate when you're sitting on a cushion. If you can find that every time when you're doing your dishes, or it's almost that kind of chop wood, carry water. Another saying I liked was, what do you do before enlightenment? You chop wood and carry water. And what do you do after enlightenment? You chop wood and carry water. Just with that awareness and that understanding. And I think what you spoke to too, for that, having your why, knowing that there's really like finding that important reason that's going to be what your focus, you're kind of around as you traverse up the mountain and you're taking all these steps, you're getting scratched and bruised as you're going along. That kind of like core reasoning, like, why is all this happening? Why is it so important to continue on and carry forward? Just reiterating the support, to have whatever it's a team of people or just a community of others who are also endeavoring in that pursuit, to be able to connect and say, hey, you doing okay over there? You need anything? I think is hugely important. Hoping to and working to foster more of that. That's what a lot of this with the New Earth entrepreneurs, and starting to create this kind of connection points with others, having these kinds of conversations to share with others, but eventually to pool and collect people, so that way we can just be more aware of what one another are doing, how we can support each other, and not just be walking up the mountain alone or feeling like we're walking alone. Just really be aware that somebody asked me once, not too long ago, when we were having a conversation about what my community was like, and I was like, honestly, it feels like an invisible army a lot of times, where it's like, I know we're out there, like, each doing our individual work and doing what we need to help this great turning. And but a lot of times I'm like, where is it actually, like in the physical or even in the digital? Just having those connection points that say, there you are. Like, here's that intimacy of knowing that we're in this together. So I think that is, just want to reiterate some of those points that you mentioned. I've got another two-parted question here, where you talked about doing the work, and I'd love to hear from your own interpretations, like what doing the work would look like for individuals. And there's so many different stories that people will be working through for themselves individually, what that kind of work could be like, and then that might transfer over. But I'm also curious maybe to share some about what you're up to with your offerings, with your communities, shed a little bit more light on that, give some people ideas about what it is that you're doing, and if they want to try to connect with you further, what it looks like to be part of the community, the Gaia Sophia School of Healing.
Okay, for me, it's been what they call the grief work, which is really the alchemizing of our personal core wounds into power, into wisdom, into our authentic selves, right? And so it's being willing to meet those places in ourselves that we might have avoided or run away from. So the grief, the unhealed trauma, the shadow, as I definitely am a huge fan of Carl Jung and shadow work in general, which I think grief and trauma fall under that category. And as we meet those parts of ourselves and bring them into the light of awareness, of conscious awareness, one by one, they transform into our gifts, into our creativity, into our light. And I feel like that's what everyone wants access to, right? Like, why am I not happy? Why am I depressed? Why am I anxious? Now, so much of it is not our own personal stuff. I think, like you and I talked about on the phone, so much of it is collective trauma and this notion of separation, which I think is the root of all the issues that we have as humans, is that we are separate from spirit, we're separate from nature, we're separate from each other. Illusion, or rather delusion even, is what makes us feel so afraid if everything is either love or fear. So it's facing all those parts of us that are in fear and confused about who we are, and meeting them with love and compassion. And that has worked, and there's many ways to do that. There are many tools with which to do that. I am currently about midway through my training with Somatic Experiencing International. I know the work of Peter Levine. just adding to my toolbox, but I recognized at some point that, and it's ironic coming from being a body worker first, and I've done all of these other things to come back to the body and realize that we really need that piece. It's such a core piece of our brain and our nervous system, our physiology, because what I discovered in my own healing path and in working with other people is that you can't push past the physiology. You can't push past the brain. And our brain's number one job is to keep us safe. So even if something good like growing your business, for example, and sharing your work with the world, if that feels unsafe for whatever reason, our brain will not allow us to go there. Plain and simple. It all goes back to the brain and the nervous system opening up so much in terms of my personal path and in my work with clients. It's really transforming that as well. I have a background in different spiritual traditions, shamanism and Buddhism primarily. And Buddhist path for me has been and continues to be such a grounding force because it is so much about the acceptance of who we are in the moment, what life is in the moment, without too much attachment or aversion. And that's the practice forever. And I feel like the somatic piece really ties into that well in terms of coming into our bodies. And that's the grounded piece, is that rooting in our own bodies and coming, quote unquote, home to our own bodies and our connection to the earth and nature and then other people. I think I answered your first question, at least, maybe clearly. I just want to check in and see if you have any questions or anything about that, or if I missed any pieces.
Yeah, that strikes a chord for me about, not that I've studied with like Carl Jung, but for my own experiences of embracing the grief, embracing the parts, and what you talked about too, like procrastination and how some of these different parts might show up when we haven't really been able to integrate that. And I think that hits the nail on the head in terms of what people could be considering. Maybe they've done a lot of work, maybe they haven't, just how to frame that in terms of how they can be considering to, and I feel like you actually got into it, my own imagining, but some of how it is that you approach that connection for the work that you do with healers, training healers, but how to make those connection points to ourselves to really feel like we're coming home to ourselves, like you said, how to bridge that. I feel like the second part will bring even more clarity about what the experience for you looks like real world, where you're working with others. And I won't, because I'm curious to hear from you what that looks like for you, because if I remember correctly, you work with other healers, training them as well.
I want to say one more thing on that, because this definitely ties into the next part, is that so many, if not most of the people I've worked with over the years come to me with things like anxiety, depression, difficulty navigating relationships. And there is so much judgment about where they are. Like, that seems to be the overarching, what's wrong with me that I'm struggling like this? That adds a whole other layer of pain to the pain that's already there. This judgment and wrongness of hurting. And so we have to deal with that top layer of judgment before we can even get to the underlying issues that bring someone in. And to me, it's, people don't seem to get that this is part of being human. And it's especially part of being human in a situation like we're living in at this time on planet Earth. Any emotional or mental health issues are a normal response to an abnormal situation. It's not we're abnormal and this is normal. It's the other way around. We're flipped inside out, I feel like, in a lot of ways. And so to bring that into my work, I feel like there are levels that so much of the work is, like I said, around the great work to whatever degree, which is turning towards ourselves, because most people are so externally oriented. What do other people need? What other people want? How should I be? Just or trying to get things out here, right? If I get this, that, and the other thing, or make this money, or get this degree, then I'll feel okay. Then if I get these people's approval, then I'll feel okay. Trying to consolidate our sense of self on some level, and it never works. It can never work, right? Because it's the wrong way around. And so it's like helping people to orient toward healing the relationship with themselves, what they tell themselves about who they are, about their value, because I feel like most of us, to varying degrees, are walking around with some level of unworthiness, and getting that, no, your worth is inherent, and really deeply connecting to that and starting to tend to the self. And like I said, these wounds that have gone ignored or even pushed away for how long, and that work becomes our own individual medicine. The wounds that we alchemize within ourselves becomes so much of what we offer the world. And then, of course, yeah, there are training programs, like I have a medicine woman training that is actual concrete healing skills. But the first part of it is going through this process, this alchemical process of healing our own wounds first. Because I will tell you this, and this is another thing of experience in most of the training programs I've done, is where it's okay, here, learn how to be a healer. And my personal experience, and I know it happens for other people too, is that then we go out in the world and try to do our healing work, and our own stuff, like I said earlier, comes up all over the place. Whereas if we do ourselves first, like healing, spiritual growth, evolution is ongoing. But if we get a good start going and we know how to do our inner work and we're already engaged in it, then we're more likely to be empowered and embodied as we start to move into actually helping other people in the world, versus helping and us being starving and struggling, and the eventually leads to burnout, maybe even resentment, and completely wanting to quit, if that makes sense. It's because so many of us are empaths or sensitives. A lot of people are codependent even, or were parentified as children where we had to take care of sick parents or what have you, and our own needs and our own who are we as separate individual humans was never tended to, right? And we can lose ourselves in our work if we don't do our own work as part of it, I think. So
yeah, we can lose ourselves. I think what you said about the groups of people that I'm hoping to reach, because a lot of what I found with entrepreneurialism for myself and for what seems like the cultural milieu of entrepreneurialism and business is a lot of trying to get offers that aren't necessarily aligned with those kinds of values, or coming from people who have done that inner work. So not that there's necessarily anything new to add, but I just think that's something really important to highlight. And I've heard it worded in a way like the have, do, be versus the be, do, have. Like instead of wanting to have something so that you can feel a certain way, actually just, finding how to be in the way that you're trying to feel to have those things, and let it come from that.
mm-hmm.
Just feels like such an important part of what I've found for the entrepreneurial journey for me anyways, about that. Even though I still hold visions for myself about what could be achieved, really trying to stay focused, but that it's like it comes back to almost like that why, like that centerpiece of what the core of the mission or the like the guiding values, like where is this coming from versus just what are we going to get from it.
Yeah, if I can say something about that, because it's tricky. It's really tricky because I am so aligned with what I can give and offer, right? And yet we live in a capitalist society where we have to make money, where we have to pay rent, we have to pay bills, and we have to survive. And so if our healing work is also what we do for a living, that to me is tricky to navigate. I think it is for a lot of us, because in an ideal world, as in indigenous cultures, right, there's not this commodification of things in general. And I would love for that not to be a part of it at all. But it is. And that for me is the part I really don't like about the marketing piece. It always feels disingenuous to me. And it does, it feels, I don't know how, like I'm trying to get something. And that's why it was like, okay, I can't do this. I can't even have my hands in it because it feels, honestly, it feels gross to me. And I don't know how to do it and not feel horrible about it, but it has to be done, right? So I'm not quite sure what the answer is to that. I think it's just another one of those pieces where it's one foot in this world, one foot in that world.
Capitalism light.
But how do we do capitalism light anymore? It's like the cost of living and rents, and you can't really do it light unless you're living off grid somewhere or maybe in another country. I don't know, but we're locked in this system where it's challenging to not get pulled into that. And especially when you look around, and that's what most everyone is engaged in. And we are part of the collective consciousness. I'm going to say, unfortunately, in certain ways, we're part of that. So that's an open query for me.
I like what you brought up too about this kind of, I feel an interesting, almost like kind of part of the in-between world of, even though it stretches back hundreds of years, the indigenous culture of living with non-commodity. We still had to go forage, grow, hunt food, but most of those things were kind of inherent in the way of living. And so it's interesting, yeah, to be in that in-between stage where we've separated from that. We're in this kind of hyper-individualistic, you got to make it to earn your keep, you earn your living. And then I hold a curious, dare I say, it's a hesitant optimism for where the trajectory of society is going. It's so relevant right now too, with like how much like AI is becoming like the buzzword, and just a lot of innovation around there. But a lot of the processes that go on with that, and being able to not just systematize, but like we can access things like food or housing and it not cost all of this time, energy, and this. I'm listening to an author right now, Ray Kurzweil, who's very much in the he works with like human longevity, and has just had his hand in kind of like the pulse of where these, like, from sequencing the human genome, he was able to predict when like our technological advancement would get to that point, and people were like, no, it's not going to happen by then. And so I'm listening to a book of his that he just released like a few days ago, and talking about this next, like the 2030s, 2040s, how life might change for humans as we learn to 3D print homes, and cost of living could be actually like brought down to near over time. Like it gets more efficient to be able to take materials, put them into the kinds of structures or the ways that we need them to grow food, and not have it be needing to be transported all over the planet, be able to do that more locally. And so I hold some optimism that we're working in a way where we can take, and I always want to see this kind of, I like this, the AI, artificial intelligence, or I've heard AI referred to as ancient intelligence as well. And I feel like there's a blending of those worlds where we can really allow, because I think there's a lot of like fear and skepticism too about like how AI or technological advancements are going to impact how we live as humans. I'm hopeful, and what I want to help you working with is how we can take away some of these processes like marketing, or just some of the things that feel more disingenuous or more of a challenge for humans, so that we're like, this is something that's preventing me from living more as an embodied human. Like, how do I be able to take some of that weight off? If it's providing cost of living, finding food, and they're still in between. It's not just, I don't think, a flick of a switch. It's the trudging up the mountain like we've spoken about. But yeah, I think that is part of the ideal or the vision, that we find out collectively how we can separate a little bit from that. I have to get these things because it is such like a, when combining like the work we want to do with survival and trying to provide for ourselves, which does become almost like a winner take all if we're provided for, if we have those kind of base level necessities taken care of. Then we can consider, how do we want to do our work, how do we want to show up in a way that's not that scarcity, that's not like a fear of, I'm afraid I'm not going to have things, and more so like a place of, I get to give these things.
What's interesting when you're talking about this, I'm thinking about how you mentioned the law of attraction earlier, if we are in that survival mode, people pick up on that energy. They don't know consciously what it is, but they pick up on it. And there can be a sense of desperation if we're in survival mode. And that can repel the people that we're here to help. And so I guess that takes me back to the thematic piece. It's, yes, we need things in the external world in order to be safe. How much is enough to actually be safe? Like, we can have these ideas in our head that I need to succeed and be big and make all the six figures. I see that all over the place in the coaching world. Make six figures, and we're not doing that we're quote unquote failing. And that can put us in survival mode when we're not even actually in survival mode. In reality, it's just we're measuring ourselves against some unrealistic ideal, or what we think other people are doing, or what we think we should be doing, when really the safety has to be sourced from inside of ourselves in our own system. Even say you got there, there would be another there to get to, because that's how ego operates, right? It's still not enough. It's like being happy with and realistic about what is enough, and how can I feel like I'm enough so that I'm not starving and looking for enoughness out there somewhere. I'm externally sourcing all my worth, essentially. So weird.
Yeah, it really is having feet and kind of two worlds. Because that self-worth is so important, and it is, I just know for myself too, because I've walked this balancing act of wanting to be in that place of self-resourced and that survival of, but what about, and one that really catches me a lot too is like the future, like providing for my future self and making sure that there will be enough going forward, almost like preparing for the winter, like trying to make sure there's like enough seeds and enough grains in stock, or whatever it is that's needed. But yeah, I think that is such an important piece to note about just finding that self-worth and coming from that place. Because I think after that, I think it can almost, and it's not the reality for me right now, but it is a desire for me, is to have it be almost more of like a game, like a fun thing, like marketing and sales. And it's such an interesting thing, because it does come from that, okay, what resources do you have for me to be able to offer this value? And maybe there is a time in the future coming where we don't have to have that same kind of like commodified exchange of value. It could be more so just like, here are really beneficial things that are, that's what I think content pieces like this are about, is just like value that can just be freely given, exchanged, that we can benefit from, and there's different levels that we can engage with each other. But I think that is so important that we have resources that can be freely shared. But I do think that, yeah, at some point I almost like to feel like the money, even though it is like symbolic of resources and survival right now, being almost like the game count on a video game or something, for example, where it's look at how much like impact, or it's almost like just symbolic of, I reached this many people, I made that much value to the marketplace right now, is how it translates.
Yeah.
Which I think can be really fun, but it has to be navigated in a way that's not fully focused on that. And, oh yeah, I made the six figures, because it is benchmark after benchmark, and infinite numbers don't stop. But I've not been there myself, but I've heard a number of people talk about the trap of success and going for those external things and not feeling that internal sense of fulfillment, because they didn't come from that place. They were looking outside of themselves to fill that. So yeah, very important notes, especially for this kind of community of people that I know I'm trying to reach, this kind of like the holistic entrepreneur, the healers, the experts, the educators, the people who they're doing their personal work, and then how is it that we take that and we translate that out to share with the rest of the community, the rest of the world. So I think those are very important. And I'm curious too, as we maybe get into some of these closing moments, if there's anything you feel like we might have passed over, or just anything else you feel is a residual golden nugget that you're like, oh, that would have been really key insight that you just are holding on to, valuable to share.
Nothing's occurring to me in this moment. I guess I would maybe want to reiterate the importance of building community around these things and healing in communities, growing in community, supporting one another in our work as healers, as community. I really just feel like that is the central focus, is that of connection. Because there's a quote, and I'm not saying it perfectly, but Stephen Porges, who created the polyvagal theory, and he says, trauma replaces patterns of connection with patterns of protection. And so if we're healing trauma, we all carry trauma, personally, ancestrally, collectively. Just we're living in an ongoing traumatic situation in a capitalist society such as we are. And so many of us are walking around protected and defended and blocked off from ourselves and, again, from nature, from the earth, and from one another. And so there's this feeling of, I'm alone in this. Nobody will understand, and even if they see me, they won't want me around, and I need to hide. That is a lot of it, I feel like, is a byproduct of this stigma around trauma and mental and emotional health issues that is really pervasive, or any kind of struggle for that matter, whether it's addiction or alcoholism, mental health. There's a huge range. And people who already have a tendency to hide and isolate and feel like they're not enough hide even more and are more isolated. And I think I'm glad this is coming up, because this last piece I want to say is that in indigenous cultures and shamanic cultures, people who struggle in these ways with, we'll say, mental health issues, just as an example, are understood to be the shaman of the tribe. Because trauma and mental health issues open us up, or even near-death experiences is another example, or prolonged illness. So there are different examples, but they open us up to something greater, to connection with energy, with spirit, with source, in a way that gives us access to something, to medicine, again, that we could share with others. But since there's this judgment and push away of people who struggle, and a medication, right, here, take a pill for this, that, or the other thing, instead of recognizing it as a gift and fostering it as such, it is heartbreaking for me, both as a trauma survivor and seeing other people who struggle in different ways struggle in that way and think there's something wrong with them, instead of understanding that there's a gift inside of it. That, to me, is something I feel really strongly about, and also frustrated by, because it's just the way of things. I'm hoping that also is something that can change and evolve as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. It brings back that kind of, working with the outer layer of feeling the shame or feeling bad about feeling like, or being aware of trauma or whatever is underneath that. They're critical, important. Appreciate you bringing and highlighting that for all the work that you're doing. And I'm curious too, just for anybody who's tuning into this, kind of, if you have a particular kind of group of people, do you focus with working with women in particular?
Yeah, I'm primarily working with women at this point. Most of my clients for many years have mostly been women. Obviously, I am a woman, and I understand the unique needs and struggles of women. I'm at this point in life where I'm in my 50s, and aging in our culture as a whole, as women, is a thing, which is really challenging, that people don't talk about, like midlife, menopause, getting older. Like, aging women in our culture are also pushed out in a way. So I feel, for a lot of reasons, those reasons and others, I'm more passionate about working with women. And I feel like the feminine has been so repressed. And also, obviously, a lot of different peoples are repressed on this planet, but women's voices have been stifled in so many ways. And we have been conditioned to be small and quiet and meek instead of standing in our power. And I feel like as women, we carry within us so potently the energy of our mother Gaia, right? That divine mother goddess energy. And so reawakening that, I feel like, is a huge part of bringing consciousness to this planet, which to me, all of this that we've been talking about at the end of the day, if we could condense it down, is about consciousness. It's about the expansion of consciousness on this planet, right? The more awake we are, the more aware we are, the more we can change things.
Absolutely. And again, I'm going to link to your website. I think you have a free course that people can.
I do. I have a free course that's called Inner Sanctuary. It is a space of peace and harmony within the self that you can go and connect with, and that is a resource. It's, as we've been talking about, two worlds, right? The idea is to keep one foot firmly grounded in that inner sanctuary within us, even as the other foot is out here navigating the complexities of the external world, so that we stay grounded in that place in ourselves. So I've got that free course. I've got some other free resources on my website. I do have a free community space that is also available. There's not a lot going on in that space, but it gives access to our one active membership right now is only $33 a month. And I think last month was our first month, and they got 4 hours of live time with me, 2 hours of class time and 2 hours of a community circle, sort of integration, healing, Q&A circles. It's great value for that amount of money. And there's a community component that is off of social media. So, yeah, and I'm coming up with, I've got so many things that I'm wanting to put out and that I'm in the creation process with. And in addition, as I said, I do somatic coaching programs as well, one-on-one with people. So yeah, there's lots of stuff on my website.
Awesome. Yeah, and again, I'm going to link that on anywhere that I'm sharing it, if it's YouTube or podcast. Greatly appreciate your time and the work that you're doing, and for taking this time to share about some of what your journey has been like, to some of the kind of like, you could almost be like a spokesperson for some of this collective transitioning that we're doing, the healing work as individuals, and then collectively too, just this kind of process and the progress that we're moving through and towards to really come back to ourselves. I think that was just something that really stood out as like a kind of key point of what the conversation has been, the consciousness, but it sounded a lot too about that embodied sense of, and I love what you said too about the changing of processes from protection to connection. Is a lot of the work that I feel like I go through, is understanding the patterns, the mechanisms, like what's keeping me from making those connections. Like what are the internal scripts and patterns that are running? I think that's just like such crucial conversations that we're having, and crucial work to be doing to help people get connected to themselves, to be able to connect more with spirit, connect more with the earth. So yeah, just great gratitude for everything that you're doing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And yes, I agree. Like men's health, I did see that in passing because I follow a lot of accounts that are talking about mental health and trauma healing and whatnot. I did see it, but I'm not sure that that's on other people's radar. I do want to name, if I give a shout out to someone else who is working with men, who I think is doing really good work, definitely here in Asheville. My friend Banks Anderson, you probably know him. Yeah. With his, I know he's putting together some breath work community thing, and they do men's circles, and this is huge because women's circles I think are becoming much more popular in different places, but men's circle, that is a new thing. I think it's really exciting work that he's doing to get that out, because men need this help too.
Yeah, I'll plug their group is called New Moon Brotherhood.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
There are some other groups, the Mankind Project, Sacred Sons. There have been some holders of this kind of men's work that I've heard of, Michael Mead and
Michael Mead, yes.
Some others who have ushered that in, I think, since the 80s. It has had a somewhat like resurgence or coming back out since more of the indigenous times, rites of passage, is like cultural just ingrainedness of, boys and men need to have that time to come together and learn from each other in that way, just like women need that time to come together and learn from each other. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing about that. Because yeah, thanks, and that whole group community, they're doing great work, and it's good that we have that support and that resource.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much for what you're doing. I'm really honored to be able to have this conversation and have thoroughly enjoyed it. And I just appreciate you and what you're doing.
That's the mission for me, feels like how I can help create that community and then also just help offer the tools and the support. I do at some point, I would love to have team members like the virtual assistants that you're working with to be able to help the other entrepreneurs, people who have this great insight, the expertise, how it is that they can just share that more easily. So yeah, this is an honor. It's something that feels so important for me, and just like the part that I can play in terms of how to help foster that great turning, the new kind of evolution of how we better take care of ourselves and better take care of the planet and walk the worlds of capitalism, spiritual nature, and
Yes. It's that balance all the time, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.